we are all together so happy to be here, Feroz Hocam, to be with you and to get the benefit from your the great ideas about the world, about Turkey, and everything. We know that you are the world famous historian, and we are so happy and so have chance to be with you in here with my students from Istanbul Gedik University, Department of Political Science and International Relations. I am also thank all of them because they sacrifice to be here than their other courses. So today will be a very beneficial and good day for us to be with you. Thank you for your acceptance us.
My question is about the ongoing war in Ukraine and Palestine. What are diplomats helping in solving the war?
Are diplomats still valid in today's global political system with regard to the ongoing war in Ukraine and Palestine? My answer to this would be no, the diplomats aren't valid. The sole great power is now the United States. And the United States, in a sense, has decided what should go on in the wars in Ukraine and Palestine. Well, not completely. I mean, Russia, for instance, launched the war in the Ukraine. But it is the United States and its allies in NATO who have supported Ukraine with arms and money. And they're the ones who are keeping the war going in the Ukraine. Otherwise, by now, Ukraine would have been defeated, and Russia would have still emerged as the second power that it used to be. Now, Russia is a declining power, and the world is becoming a unipolar world with the United States deciding what should happen. Now, the same is true in Palestine. It is true, Hamas launched the attack on Israel. And they did a substantial amount of damage, but compared to what the Israelis have done to Palestine afterwards, it was negligible. About 100 people killed, and not much damage done to Israeli property. Whereas Israel has launched its attack, and it's continuing to launch its war. It hasn't stopped. Even when, for the 5th time, the American foreign minister is making his tour of the countries of the region, the war hasn't stopped. He hasn't, in a sense, made the Israelis stop the attack. Every day you hear not only the killing of people, but the destruction of hospitals. There is hardly a hospital which is functioning in the Gaza Strip. On top of this, in the West Bank, Israelis who live on the West Bank are taking advantage of this and establishing new settlements. So the diplomats are not at all valid. There is no validity to these, to diplomats anywhere. Britain or France or Germany, these are the great powers of a little while ago, but now you would hardly hear anything from them.
Okay, thank you, sir.
What about is that your next?
Not necessarily now, but the Archil will ask his first question.
So, sir,
Loud, please.
I wanted to ask, are we living currently in a multipolar or bipolar world with China rising as a power? What would be the world order now?
Are you Achilles?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are we currently in a multipolar or bipolar world? Well, in a sense, I've begun to answer this. We are in not even a bipolar, but a unipolar world. It is America's world at the moment. Multipolarism has, in a sense, disappeared with Russia. You're right, China is beginning to emerge, but it still has some way to go to catch up with the United States. So currently we're going to live in a unipolar world for the time being. Does that answer your question? It is a unipolar world. If you're Americans or American citizens, you should be happy with that. What about your next question?
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Oh,
Osiris?
Okay. Sorry, sir. My question concerns mostly Africa.
uh-huh.
So my question is, what ways do historical colonies, legacies influence Africa's diplomatic relationship with former colonial powers?
In what way do historical colonial legacies influence Africa's diplomatic relationship with a former colonial power? In a sense, the way I see it, I don't know. I don't know a great deal about the relationship, but the historical legacies do not influence Africa's diplomatic relationship with the former colonial powers. I mean, the former colonial powers obviously owe a great debt to each African country, but they're not willing to pay this debt. And as for the African countries, for me, they seem to have wasted the legacy of independence, because Africa, let's say unlike India, is a tribal country and a tribal society. And as a result of this, there are tribal wars going on. When I look at, let's say, the Sudan, they're fighting each other. To me, this seems like a great tragedy. But what can Africa do? Africa is and has been a tribal society, and the colonial powers didn't try to alter this. They, in fact, exploited the tribal legacies that they came across. So as far as I can see, there is no relationship with the former colonial power. The former colonial powers, whether it's Britain or France, have in a sense washed their hands. You get on with it. You get on with your problem of ruling. And Africa, unfortunately, hasn't had the kind of leadership that I saw emerging in the 1950s. For me, the 1950s were a period when I thought Africa would emerge as a superpower or superpowers. But unfortunately, it didn't happen.
Feroz Hocam, Feroz Hocam, yesterday there was a news from Uganda. Uganda, the leader of Uganda now, 38 years, still insists to be in the power. But the opposition party leader and they press on them to get the power again. 38 years, the same leader managed in Uganda. Think about that, the situation in Uganda.
I don't know a great deal about Uganda, but as I said, that too must be a tribal society. And tribal societies dominated by one particular society, tribe will succeed in winning elections. That's what I see it, but as I said, I'm not an Africanist.
Sir, my question is about the Union and Progress Committee. My question is about the Union and Progress Committee in Ottoman Empire. Do you think that the
Union and Progress Committee. Union and Progress Committee.
Do you think
Union and Progress.
Yeah.
Do you think that the economy of Union Progress Committee is benefit for the Ottoman Empire?
The Union and Progress Ittihad ve Terakki, the Union and Progress Committee, was essentially a reformist committee. It wasn't a revolutionary committee. It wanted to reform the Ottoman Empire of that period, 1908 to 1918. And to some extent it succeeded. And as I say, it wasn't revolutionary. And what Turkey or the Ottoman Empire at that time needed, and it had it within Ittihad ve Terakki. If you remember, Mustafa Kemal was a unionist member. And once he'd succeeded in defeating the powers that were trying to establish their control over what was left of the Ottoman Empire, he wasn't a reformer, he got rid of the Sultan and the caliphate, and he established a completely new system with which Turkey has been living almost for the last 100 years. Does that answer your question?
I think Iram's question is very close to this
Yeah,
question.
related
That's
to
why,
this
Iram, you
question.
may ask your question.
Okay. My question is about Young Turks and Young Turks in the Ottoman Empire. In your opinion, what is the role of the Young Turk in the transformation process of the Ottoman Empire?
Well, as I just said, they reformed the Ottoman Empire. For instance, let's take the question of women. They wanted to reform the women of the Ottoman Empire. So they said, yes, we believe women should be educated. But when asked why they should be educated, they said they should be educated because women will become better housekeepers. They will become better guardians of children, etc. Now, when the Kemalists came to power and they were asked why women should be educated, they may have agreed with the original ideas, but they said, no, women should be educated so that they could enter society, so that they can become doctors, lawyers, and not just people within the household. So that was the big difference between the Unionists as radical reformers and the Kemalists as the revolutionaries. That's the way I've seen it.
I think Iram has still another question about the Ottoman Empire. Please ask the second one.
And the other question of mine is, how do you assess the impact of this movement in Ottoman-Turkish relations?
Ottoman
And Turkish, and is it related with it still?
Well, the Ottomans have gone.
Yeah.
The Ottoman Empire and the Ottomans went. And as I said, the Turks created a new language. They no longer spoke Osmanlija, Ottoman. They had a new language, which they called, as you know, Turkche. And this was, again, a revolution. The script changed. Education changed. Everything changed. Everything has changed. And to some extent, well, I don't know. I don't know whether the new governments which came towards the end of the 19th century want to change this, whether you can change it, whether you can bring back Osmanlija. So that revolution is complete.
Thank you. Again.
Sir, in your opinion, what are the key historical events that have significantly influenced the current geopolitical landscape?
what are the key historical events that have significantly influenced the current geopolitical landscape in the world?
In the world.
Well, clearly, the great influence would be the wars. After all, it was after World War II that America emerged in this current geopolitical landscape. Before that, the great powers were England, France, Germany until Germany was defeated. America, until the end of World War II, was a second-rate power. But with the money that it loaned to Britain and to France, it was able to impose its ideas on them and say, look, you have to leave India. You have lost the war. Now you must leave India. And so in 1947, Britain left India. And here you have the same thing with France. You have a total change in the geopolitical landscape of the world thanks to American power. And that American power goes on, in a sense, today.
My question is, what do you think about the globalization affecting cultures around the globe? And are you worried that the new generations could forget their cultures?
I couldn't hear it. If you give me the question.
Highlighted.
Was it the second question?
The first one.
The first. What do you think about globalization affecting cultures around the world? And are you worried that the new generations could forget their cultures? Well, globalization affecting cultures around the world, well, yes. I mean, the role of Hollywood, for instance, and the movies, that is affecting the cultures, language. The fact that here we are in Turkey, talking Turkish, talking English, because that is one of the rules of globalization, and it's affected cultures, not completely. So I don't worry that the new generations will forget their cultures. In fact, in Turkey today, for instance, within this house where I live, the older generation, which I would have thought would have learnt English, have not learnt English. The older generation, in spite of the globalization, continue to speak. I mean, I find very few people here speaking English. Younger generations are learning English today. The university where I teach, the language of instruction is English because the new generation requires English. Well, your generation requires English to get on in the world.
Faraj, please, the second question. Yeah, over there, sir. The second one.
The second question. With the constant security dilemmas in the international system, what do you advise Turkey to do with regard to nuclear weapons? Well, there are already enough nuclear weapons around the world. And for Turkey, and I still prefer to use the word Turkey instead of Turkey. I know Mr. Erdogan introduced Turkey, which doesn't often make sense when you're talking English. But anyway, I wouldn't advise Turkey to try and build nuclear weapons. Turkey can do much more, as it's doing. I mean, for instance, I like Mr. Erdogan's position on the war in Gaza. Mr. Erdogan, even though he's a member of NATO, has come out very openly and said America should not be supporting Israel, and Israel is completely in the wrong. This is quite a brave thing for Mr. Erdogan to do. So I think if he continues to take an independent position, if Turkey takes an independent position on issues facing the world, it'll do much more for Turkey and for the world than having nuclear weapons.
But it will create enemies.
Wow.
It will create enemies with Turkey. By doing that, Turkey might create enemies, maybe with the superpowers.
What enemies would it make? Why? I don't know. Maybe you're right. But a country like Turkey has to take a strong position around the problems of the world and not use any threats of nuclear weapons. I mean, Israel is a country which is much smaller than Turkey, but has nuclear weapons.
Yeah, so not necessarily to have a nuclear weapons for Turkey. Yeah, not necessarily to have a nuclear weapons in Turkey. We have to get rid of the nuclear weapons in Turkey. So it means we'll attract the other neighbors.
Well, to have.
Threat.
Yes.
Not necessarily.
I mean, I'm against this idea of going to the moon. We have so many problems in the world that we have to deal with. That I don't know how much money it takes to send a rocket to the moon, as they've just done.
$50 million.
Well, whatever money it takes, they could happily use them here to deal with the problems of, well, what is happening to the environment. I mean, that is a much more obvious problem to be dealt with than the moon. But anyway, I'm not one of those who makes these decisions.
Okay, Archie?
My second question, sir, is if Article 5 of NATO was invoked, would it mean all NATO members have to respond militarily, or is the US the only one that has to act militarily?
Well, I mean, I've already been talking about this. The US is the only one that acts militarily, if necessary. The other powers of NATO don't do very much. They don't have to. America decides.
Then in that case, what's the use of NATO if America at the end is the only one that is acting militarily?
Well, the use of NATO is that the United States, in a sense, controls it. So it's another arm of American power. It doesn't act independently, it acts according to what Washington decides. So it's good that it's there. And the fact that it's there means that the NATO powers will not act independently, which could be dangerous.
So it provides a sense of order with the US controlling that order.
Sorry?
So it provides a sense of order with the US at the top, essentially.
I haven't understood.
Yeah, US is the top for the order and control the order.
Absolutely. I mean, now Ukraine would like to enter NATO. Clearly it will strengthen NATO, it will strengthen America, and it will weaken Russia. And that's how it's been going ever since the end of the Soviet Union. I don't know if you remember when the Soviet Union came to an end, the Soviet diplomat said, look, you should promise us that you will not enter NATO. And the United States made that promise, but never kept it. As soon as, for instance, Germany left the fold of the Soviet Union, Germany entered NATO. So that was weakening of Russia as a great power.
Yeah, Osiris?
Okay. My second question is, how does China's increasing influence in Africa impact traditional diplomatic ties and global power?
Yes, of course. China's influence is increasing as a global power, but mainly through its economic influence, its road belt ideas. So far, it's not increasing its influence through military means, which I think is a good thing.
China invest all of African countries, almost all. I think the 56 countries in Africa, or about 50 of them, and they getting the good relationship between China
Of course.
and invest the billions of dollars.
Yes,
Billions of dollars.
yes.
The mutual benefit they get, the by way of Belt and Road you mentioned. And we will see what will happen next 10 years.
My second question is, if the tension between USA and China increased economically, militarily, and politically, do you think that this situation bring a war?
I didn't hear it.
Yeah, because of the economy, social, and politically relations between China and USA, this create a new war between them.
It'll create tensions, but not a new war. I mean, China has made it clear that its future with Taiwan is something that it regards as something which will happen. They don't say when. So as long as the United States leaves Taiwan, I don't think there's any danger of tension between China and Russia. Economically, they can compete. And that kind of competition is good for both countries. And let's hope it continues like that. I mean, I think the Chinese don't want war, don't want trouble. But let's see.
So that
So, what do you think about nationalism on international relations?
What do I think of?
Nationalism.
Nationalism.
Yes.
I think a country's nationalism is fine as long as it doesn't affect relationships with other powers. It seems to be fine. I don't know. I don't see why it should have any problems of international relations.
But Feris Hocam, nationalism creates the national interest, and the national interest increase, and the nationalism increase. So the problem created between the countries, mostly in the neighbor countries. For example, nationalism in Turkey, nationalism in Greece, so the weaponaries in both sides, so create the tension actually. Nationalism increased nowadays in every country. So that's bad thing. And the right politicians, right side politicians in Europe, so to create the problem actually. No democratization, but nationalism.
I see what you mean. Yes, well, that kind of nationalism, if you try to impose it on other countries, will create tensions.
Yeah, we assume that as the globalization is increased, so every countries will be much more democratic countries instead of nationalism. But we will see what will happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. Good point. Suha Pasha's point is well taken.
I have one question that I haven't in my paper.
Okay. You can ask the question freely, whatever you want to ask him, because he is ready for us, and you are last chance.
We know, I think, we all know that we won't have an Atatürk again. But my question is, Young Turks can be created again in a reformist way. Not in Turkey, because it will be so politic. I want to ask it in the world. Can it be created again?
Young Turk movements.
Yeah, Young Turks.
Yes, reformist movements could be created if necessary, wherever they're necessary, in empires, but where, for instance, Young Turk movements in countries of Africa, which would try to break away with tribalism and reform the country, would be good. I mean, in that respect, the Young Turk movement in the late Ottoman Empire was good. I mean, it wasn't revolutionary, but it was reformist. So that was good. And if you could have that in certain countries of Africa, why not?
So, the economic problems in Turkey could cause a social breakdown in the Turkish society.
Your question is here. I have your question. What a...
Yeah.
I could give you.
Oh, yes, that one.
The economic problems in Turkey could cause social breakdown in Turkish society. I don't see why. I mean, economic problems in Turkey would be up to a government to try and resolve, whether it's high inflation, etc., etc. Why it would cause a social breakdown in Turkish society, I can't imagine. Can you imagine?
Yes, I can imagine them actually.
But it would be up to a government to try and stop these kinds of disparities within society, too much wealth on the one side and poverty on the other. It should try and stop that. Why it would lead to a breakdown, I don't know. It would cause tensions, but not a breakdown. I mean, you see that in European societies. In Britain, for instance, you have disparity between rich and poor.
And not only rich and poor, but also the ideological disparity is important. And altogether creates a much more and difficult situation in Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
The ideological differences and the poor and the rich people and some of the idea goes to Ottoman Empire. The other side in the Ataturks and the Kemalist ideas. So several different tension points in Turkey now. That's why we live in chaos, and the government cannot manage this type of chaos. Maybe it creates more. That's the problem.
But there you have political parties, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party in Britain. They try to deal with, well, Labour tries to deal with these kinds of problems. But you're right. It certainly could create tensions, but I don't see a breakdown.
Yeah, breakdown maybe. Now the government try to change everything in the constitution.
Uh-huh.
So this touch in the principle of Turkey's establishment. So the main principles will be break down because of the regime is changed.
Uh-huh.
Maybe he satisfied with this explanation. What else? Any question?
Yes, I have a question. I have one question, and this question is simple. What do you think about humanity?
What do I think about?
Humanity.
The UN.
Humanity.
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 Yes.
I don't know. It's a very difficult question to. I think, of course, humanity is good. It's good to be human. But I don't know how to answer that when you say, what do I think of humanity? I think humanity is a good thing. That's about it.
There is a question, Sevde. Your question was about India?
No.
Zilan question. I have to ask this question in the sake of Cansu Köten. She is not here. She is sick. But I will ask this question on behalf of her. What does the changed constitution in India in 2019 mean, and how will it affect Muslim in India? Okay.
Well, in India, ever since, I don't know whether you're interested in Indian politics, but ever since in India, this party known as the BJP, Bharatiya Janata Party, that is to say, a nationalist party based on Hinduism. Now, India is a big country. It's not tribal. It's only in parts is it tribal, but it is culturally different and religiously very different. The religions led to the partition of the country between India and Pakistan, which you have today. And when this particular party came to power, BJP, they were determined to make Hinduism the dominant religion. Whereas when Nehru came to power in 1947 with independence, he wanted a secular country with everybody having equal rights. So anything that this government does, its desire is to weaken the Muslims and to a lesser extent Christians, but particularly Muslims, because the Muslims constitute a fairly large minority. And they're having a very difficult time. But this is the tragedy of a country which goes away from secularism, which Nehru and Gandhi introduced after the British left, and which lasted until the BJP, Bharatiya Janata Party, which means India's People's Party. So it's a very dangerous omen for India, anything like that. You know, as a Muslim, Indian Muslim, I've read and heard about terrible things that are happening, but the interesting thing is that there are lots of Hindus who are not members of BJP who disagree with this government's policies. He's not here.
She's not here, but we will inform her. And I think another one. Sevde. Oh, Sevde, yes. Cansu Keten. Yeah, one of her question. What might happen to Palestine after the Hamas-Israel war?
What should happen?
Yes. What might happen to Palestine after the Hamas-Israel war?
Well, the answer is there. Before the war, to have two independent states, one Palestine, the other Israel. They should go back to that, and America, as the great power, should impose this. But is it willing to do it? I don't think so.
Yeah.
You know, it favors Israel. In fact, you know, even after this war is over, they want to have Palestinians get out of Gaza. In fact, I haven't heard this here, but a friend of mine in London told me that there is a move of Israelis to ship Palestinians to Africa.
Yeah.
Have you heard that?
Yes.
I've never.
That they are just searching the area for them in Africa.